It is Friday, November 10th. Let's talk PlayStation. Welcome back, everyone, to another stupendous episode of LTPS. It's been a fairly busy week, a lot going on with the Sony financials, new PS5 model, and some live service updates, so a lot to cover this week. So let's begin, as always, with our PS Plus reminder. The November PS Plus Essential Games are live on PSN, so make sure you claim those, get that done. And for our first story, we have another PlayStation 5 system software update that you probably already installed when you went to put your system into rest mode. It probably prompted you to do this because as of right now it's still not mandatory. It's one of those small updates, so nothing really big or different or noteworthy to speak of. However, what some do think is responsible for a recent change on the firmware, or on the console rather, is that when you now put your system to sleep, you might have noticed a very slight change to the UI, the way the PS5 looks when there's that silhouette on the screen as you're putting the console into rest mode, or just turning it off completely. The side panels are gone, so now it's only the silhouette of the LEDs to reflect the new PS5 model that we have, because there's a slight change to the panels on that console, right? So, yeah, very slight change. It did not have anything to do with this firmware, though, so I think they probably snuck this into a previous stability firmware, and then just server-side turned it on for various users, because I'm still not on the new firmware. I already have the new animation, so just something where the various stability updates we've had, we're probably, behind the scenes priming and getting this new console ready to go, which is now available today, by the way. Speaking of which, that's a good segue into our next news story, which is about that new PS5 model, and it's something where, yes, it is out today, but a few days prior we saw various publications get the console early, so we've got, more and more comparison shots showing the new console compared to the existing one from different angles to get a better idea of exactly how much smaller it is, right? But it's already out. The thing is, though, we saw even prior to that one YouTube channel, Dave2D, and then a few other channels post some teardown videos and a closer look at the console. So Dave2D had a pretty good video with the shots he was getting. So to summarize the findings in his initial teardown, the power consumption appears to be the same. The die size also the same, so they're still using liquid metal for cooling. Internally, at a glance, it appears as though not a whole lot was really changed outside of the various new parts that were obviously needed to, facilitate the smaller size of the console. So a few things are naturally moved around, or they're smaller in regards to the motherboard layout, the heat pipes. We can see the CR2032 battery is now more accessible, which is good. Dave also shows the disk drive attachment, so that's just a latch that you pull, and then that will free up the drive without any extra tools. So there's no surprises there, but still nice to see. We also saw what the UI says to you when you try to insert a disk and not, do your online check-in to authenticate it and pair it to the console, right? So we've already been over that. So not really many surprises thus far, which in theory is a good thing, but it seems very obvious that the console, in many ways, is a is a way for Sony to streamline manufacturing and price down many aspects of the hardware, which kind of goes into the financials we'll talk about later. But for the most part, yeah, it's out there. So and as we've said many times over, Sony does not send out hardware early. So at least in the case of this console, we'll try and get coverage out as soon as possible. Hopefully by tonight, if not tomorrow. But if you have any questions relating to the console that have not been answered thus far, we're going to try and get as in-depth as we can on this thing and do, cover some of the more minute details and do some more, hopefully in-depth comparisons and things like that. But we'll try and have some coverage up, and that goes for the, PlayStation Portal and also the Explorer earbuds, which are also in the hands of media right now. So same thing there. We'll try and get coverage out as soon as possible and really dive into the PlayStation minute details that we tend to do on here versus other sources. But, something where it's going to take a little bit longer for us to talk about it. Now, moving on to our next news story, I'm sure a lot of you probably noticed that we've had various news stories in the past few weeks about how PS5 has gotten a new feature here, a new feature there, all very minor but welcome stuff, and now we're finding out that we're losing a feature. One I would argue is kind of a big deal, and that is being able to post content directly on X, formerly known as Twitter. So PlayStation sent out an official notice directly on console stating that November 13th is the last day integration on X will no longer work with PS4 and PS5. So you won't be able to view content published on X directly on console, and you won't be able to post new content directly from the console as well. Now, you could, in theory, still send your captures to the PlayStation mobile app. You can do auto uploads, and then you can just manually take the capture and then go to the X mobile app and share it that way. So that's still possible. The share button is not completely dead. It just means that you can't write out a tweet on console and then attach content that way and share it directly. Now, Elon Musk himself responded to an account announcing the news, and he said he's going to look into it. So that's all we know right now, but it does seem apparent that in a few days this will no longer work, and not exactly surprising if we look at what's happened with the platform since the start of this year, really since Musk acquired the company. But Microsoft, they actually stopped allowing Twitter support a few months ago, and now PlayStation dropping support. Nintendo's still doing it, but maybe they're also not too far behind, because what we do know is that the platform has substantially increased the API costs. So for a company like Sony, if it scales appropriately with the amount of users that are actually using that feature, it could be very costly. And so it might be something where Sony just figures, we don't have to pay this. Obviously, Microsoft came to a similar conclusion, if that is what we think is what happened. And that's the thing too, right? I mean, I know some are kind of looking at this and going, okay, why can't Sony as a big company pay for this? But at least, if we want to speak more broadly on X as a social media platform, obviously we're not here to make too much commentary on it, but I think it would be fair to say that there's been many questionable changes which have led many companies, not just PlayStation and Sony on the whole, but it's led many companies to reevaluate their relationship with this platform, right? There's been many that have in some way, shape, or form either cut ties, or they've sort of really toned down their amount of support and their advertising spend on the platform. That was a big story for X at the time too, is that many companies were leaving the platform for advertising. Now they say about 90-something% are already back on board, but the advertising spend is still substantially lower than before. So it's quite apparent that many companies are not placing nearly as much value into X or what the site has become since Musk has acquired the company. And that much is certain, given that Musk himself has already confirmed that the value of the company is like less than half than what he paid, which at the time when he spent $44 billion, that was already more than what Twitter was worth. So there's a lot that can be said in relation to that, but I think it would be safe to say that Sony is very much kind of falling under that spectrum of just reevaluating what makes sense on that platform. So for now, it looks like the functionality is going to be lost. Not completely, but that's what we know so far. Next up, we have an encouraging update on the Last of Us multiplayer project, which seemingly confirms it's not dead just yet based on a recent post on X from the game director at Naughty Dog, Vineet Agarwal, where he was celebrating his recent completion of Super Mario Bros. Wonder, and he said towards the bottom, and I quote here, "And so this tweet can live on in peace. Yes, I'm still working on that game," which they are the director on this particular project. So that's good news. I mean, it's not much to go on, especially given that when we look back at the last major update on the story, we had a report from Kotaku mentioning that the project was on ice, that it was down to a skeleton crew, and that was after we had heard a few months prior to that Bungie had done their portfolio review of Sony's live service titles. They had some serious concerns about the long-term viability of this project, and so it's been not good news after not good news over and over. But on the other end of the spectrum, what's been so interesting is that Naughty Dog has also been making very brief comments, or at least sort of putting out there that, hey, we are still working on it, we're still working on it, and now we've got this, where it's another we're still working on it kind of answer. So, and the thing is, I mean, when it comes to the rumors versus what's being said officially, there's got to be a level of truth to both accounts, where I would venture a guess and say there is some trouble going on with this project, and at least with Naughty Dog trying to be overly protective and perhaps secretive towards what's really going on with this project. It's not like they want to be forthcoming about all the problems related to it, right? So it's obviously they would want to not sort of divulge that stuff, so it's interesting. But I still am going to stand by, out of all the live service titles PlayStation is funding and wanting to put out, this is still the only one that I have genuine excitement for, and I want to see it through all the way. I still find when it comes to the Last of Us IP, the possibility of what this could be with a, a long-standing extraction, ever-evolving story and landscape in the Last of Us universe. I find that when you look at it holistically, this is the one property and the kind of experience that I think could work and resonate in a very big, meaningful way. And that's coming from somebody that does not really care much for live service at all. This is the one game I want to see actually come out. So perhaps it is something where they're very committed and they will eventually ship something. But for the time being, it's not dead just yet. Next up, Santa Monica Studio and PlayStation were celebrating the 1-year anniversary of shipping God of War Ragnarök on PS4, PS5. It's been 1 year since release, and they put out some funny videos like Midgard Mishaps 2. They did this for the first game, did it again this time around, which really funny. I love when developers share these like little mashup reels of what are just a collection of ridiculous things that can oftentimes pop up during game development. So some really twisted nightmare fuel type things that appear, but those are always really funny to see. There was also a breakdancing video of Kratos and Atreus, which the funny story behind that was the principal tech animator at Santa Monica Studio, TLOU, cleaned this up after somebody from the UI team, Andy Lang, I guess they're a really good breakdancer, so when they were in the mocap suit and just kind of messing around, that's where they did some crazy breakdancing moves, and then TLOU cleaned this up, and sure enough, they then put this video out. So just fun little thing to look at there. Again, something where it's like it's always like wholesome to see studios celebrate in any sort of meaningful way. So 1 year anniversary, let's have some fun with just seeing Kratos do some ridiculous things, and also looking at that nightmare fuel from Midgard Mishaps 2. Moving on to the PlayStation 5 console timed exclusive Silent Hill 2, where that's been mostly radio silent for the past few months. However, recently we saw some retailer listings go live for the game, which is normally a tell-all that we might be getting a new trailer fairly soon with a confirmed release date. So if I had to guess, we might be seeing this at the Game Awards. But as a little tangent offshoot here, we did see that there was a Best Buy listing that initially had a description for the game saying that there was going to be some kind of special origin story included, which many thought meant that there was going to be a new expansion where you play as Pyramid Head, but Konami had to then send out a statement to Eurogamer confirming this was incorrect. So if you saw that, that's not actually true. But we did hear about Konami during an earnings call. One of their representatives did say that there's going to be more remakes and new entries for the Silent Hill series. New entries we already know about, but remakes as well for the Silent Hill IP in particular. That would mean that perhaps there's more coming that they have not said just yet. I mean, at this point for Konami, it seems apparent that they're exploring old IP in a big way with the Metal Gear series and Silent Hill. It's really more a question mark of when we will finally hear more about Castlevania. That's the one thing. Well, that and now I guess other remakes that are unannounced for the Silent Hill IP, which we also apparently saw from the PC Games benchmark website that the release date was listed as March 21st. Not sure where they're getting that date from, but perhaps that also might be the date that is going to be announced very soon. Now let's get into those juicy Sony financials. Their fiscal report for Q2 2023, which runs from July to the end of September. And at least for SIE, it's mostly good news. So for PS5, they shipped 4.9 million consoles. That's 8.2 million so far this year. So for PS5's worldwide total, that's 46.6 million. They do still have a very aggressive target of shipping 25 million units this fiscal year, so with that new model coming, well-priced bundles, and the holiday season, they might be in store for their most successful quarter in PlayStation history, which would then easily put them over the PS4 rate of sale, where as of right now, it's still slightly behind PS4. It was like nearly there, and so it's more or less going to get past that very soon. But going back to this quarter, monthly active users, that's still pretty flat, 107 million, which is up a lot from 102 million year over year, but slightly down from 108 million the last two quarters. But we do know from the recent earnings call that the ratio of PS5 users is growing, so that's now a little bit over 40%. As for full game digital software ratio, that is the same story in that it was 67%, so it's up year on year, but down from the last quarter. Now, some of you did send over that Push Square story where they highlighted how physical game sales were only 4%, which is certainly an attention-grabbing headline, but that number has always been quite low when you consider that's the percentage out of the entire revenue pie. So, having said that, it is down still, influenced by first-party game sales, which are the lowest they've been since Sony started reporting these numbers at 4.7 million units. Since they have a better margin on those games and there's no major first-party releases during this quarter, that is going to hit physical revenue pretty hard, so that's why that's one of the only key metrics here that is down year on year. Elsewhere in the report, though, everything else is seemingly up year on year. So console sales, revenue, it's another record-breaking quarter, SIE's most successful Q2 yet. And there's some other interesting things to note. For example, a negative impact on operating income was an increase in losses from hardware. So that could be bundles that are basically throwing in a game for free, or it could also relate to the new model, getting that console ready to ship out. So kind of some initial startup costs with getting the thing ready to go, but it does sort of highlight the ongoing, notion that we're just in a different landscape where consoles don't see these aggressive MSRP price cuts throughout the life cycle. So we're still probably going to have a $449 and $499 PS5 for a very long time. But Spider-Man 2 sales, we also learned that it's over 5 million units as of the end of October, so no big surprises there. It's definitely a strong performer. So I guess there's nothing really too surprising here when we look back at prior fiscal reports or every sort of quarterly update that we have. The company doing really well. SIE is doing really well. Other parts, not so much. So there's, seasonality to these things, but we are looking at, I should say we are currently in what should be a very strong quarter for the company, because this is the most PS5 fulfillment that they're going to have. There's a new model, again, well-priced bundles, like the MW3 one. Despite reviews for MW3, it's a $500 PS5 bundle that has the game for free. Tell me that's not going to do well. There should be a Spider-Man 2 one hitting fairly soon. They've actually got consoles to sell, so they should be looking at some insane numbers, which we'll then be talking about during the next fiscal report, which won't be until next year, obviously. But they still have no problem selling PlayStation consoles. But the more interesting revelation came from the earnings call, where the Sony CFO, co-president, the upcoming interim SIE CEO, Hiroki Totoki, mentioned that for the live service games from SIE, half of them have been delayed. So he said, and I quote here, "We are reviewing this. We are trying as much as possible to ensure these games are enjoyed and liked by gamers for a long time. Of the 12 titles, 6 titles will be released by fiscal year 25. That's our current plan. As for the remaining 6 titles, we are still working on that. That's the total number of live service and multiplayer titles, and mid to long term, we want to push this kind of service, and that's the unchanged policy of the company. It's not like we stick to certain titles, but game quality should be the most important thing." So that is our most recent update on the ongoing live service initiative, which, going back to the timeline that we were told before, they wanted to ship 12 by fiscal year 25, which means that, yes, half of these games are not on time, which, big shocker. The thing is, the most obvious conclusion is that, okay, part of the Bungie integration is that they were not simply criticizing only The Last of Us multiplayer. Very likely they had some words for the other projects that are ongoing as well, right? Which we can chalk up to Guerrilla's, Horizon multiplayer, London Studios, Fantasy IP, also Insomniac, or maybe whatever Sucker Punch is doing for Legends 2.0. You got to assume it's probably those games, since Concord and Fair Games already had formal reveals, so perhaps we already are expecting those games are on time, and those are the ones that are going to ship by fiscal year 25, and just, these other titles are now possibly 26 and further out. But anyway, the point is, that conclusion I think was a fair one, but what's also reasonably fair is that even if SIE never acquired Bungie, games are just ridiculously hard to make and put together. It's a massive undertaking for any company, even with standard single-player stuff, which Sony has historically been very good at. But historically, they have very little experience in this area. And so, with or without Bungie, stands to reason that these games were not going to ship on time, or at least a good portion of them. So, to hear half of them being delayed, honestly, not surprised at all. And it's very much a delay. They're still coming, as Hiroki Totoki mentions. And that just, like, again, kind of goes into the exhausting nature of this topic, at least with PlayStation, where it's like the immediate gut response, understandably, as always, I hate live service, I don't care, they need to stop doing this and that, but nobody wants to listen to the holistic nature of this is investment across the board. It's single player on top of now doing live service games. They're extremely lucrative. Only one of these games out of 12 have to hit in a big way to then become a massive money-making cow, which in theory can keep funding SIE and releasing more single-player games. It just, nobody wants to listen to that. I don't know why, but I'm still of the mind that I want to see them eventually come out. I'm curious as to what a number of these titles look like, and we'll have to keep waiting, which is like not a bad thing, obviously, for those that don't care about these titles. But I think it was always a reasonable assumption to think that these are not going to come out on time. But they're doing what should be done, right? If these games aren't ready, give them more time, give them the resources, and, you know, let the Bungie integration do what it's here to do. You know, even though there's been a lot of sour news on Bungie lately, there's still a top-tier live service studio that has a ridiculous amount of expertise in this area. Bungie still has a massive high player count for concurrent players at any given time, so they know this better than most other studios. So let the integration do exactly what it's supposed to do, right? For all the criticism we can say about Sony doing live service titles, I'll be damned if they're not at least going about this in the most potentially successful way, even though the odds are always going to be stacked against them. Moving on to an update for the India Hero project. Recently, the India Game Developers Conference happened, where PlayStation did have a presentation there talking about this program, which they mentioned that for the submission process, most of the applicants so far have no experience developing on console, which for this kind of program is a good thing. You want applicants that, you know, have no experience shipping on console. That way, not only for funding, but it's a mentorship program as well. So Sony's going to be helping these studios get off the ground and working them through the more console-specific certification process. And so that's good to see. And Sony confirmed that the first titles are set to be announced during the first half of 2024. So they are very much full steam ahead on this program. And I still think it's such a great idea. I mean, it's something where China Hero is on that third phase. Now they're doing India Hero project. Microsoft was also at this conference as well. So the platform holders, I think, should, and they are, placing a great importance on these emerging markets and this untapped talent in all these different countries that have so far, you know, not really had the kind of support that they're now getting. So this kind of program is great for, you know, getting them off the ground. And in theory, it's not even so much a good for PlayStation thing, right? It's good for the industry. At that point, you know, some of these games might really take off in a meaningful way where then they can make their next game, find a publisher that's, say, not PlayStation, right? But then they have the funding secured for shipping on multiple platforms on day one. It's a lovely cycle that we're seeing so far, so we will be closely monitoring this program. Moving on to a really weird little situation going on here, which is a Christmas Massacre is coming to PlayStation, which is like this 80s inspired slasher game. It came out 2 years ago on PC. It's got PS1 low poly graphics, and recently it was confirmed it was coming to PlayStation, but apparently the developer Puppet Combo responded to fans on X that the game is too crazy for Nintendo and Xbox, which their previous game Cannibal came out on all platforms. So in theory, I'm not sure why this particular game would, and this is assuming they're, when they say too crazy, does that mean, okay, they didn't pass certification to release on Nintendo and Xbox? And but PlayStation did, which that's the story, I guess, because PlayStation, out of the big three, has been the one that's, on occasion denying games or censoring games in certain ways, which primarily relates to sort of sexual explicit content or, the insinuation of certain content based on how the game is made and what they're trying to, sort of do, right? So that's always been like a big thing lately with PlayStation, but it just seems like if that's the case, certain guidelines just show that PlayStation is more lenient with violence, because this is just a very violent game. There's really nothing sexual going on in here, at least as far as I know. But I guess maybe there's just one particular... It's got to be something where there's like one thing in the game that happens that is just like a no-no for like any sort of on-paper rules at Nintendo or Xbox. Not sure what the case is there, but it was still like one of those fringe cases where it was worth discussing and bringing up. Now, I'm sure most of you probably know, but LTPS as a show primarily covers PlayStation news, so news has to be in some way related to PlayStation games, hardware, the business, whatever the case may be. But years ago, when I just started, I was a bit more loose on news, and sometimes just for whatever reason, I would cover third-party stuff. And so I feel like I would be remiss to not mention what recently happened, which was the confirmation of Grand Theft Auto 6 finally getting a reveal trailer next month, which is big news, obviously, because this is easily the most anticipated video game in history. Just based on sheer social media metrics alone, it is without a doubt the most anticipated video game ever, in all likelihood. And so I thought it'd be fun to mention that, years ago, when we started LTPS, I was covering Grand Theft Auto 5 on PlayStation 3. And now we're finally getting GTA 6. Which for me personally, very excited for, because Grand Theft Auto is a top 3 franchise for me. I don't play online. I think that was obvious, but with single player at least, GTA is up there. My top 3 favorite game franchises: Grand Theft Auto, Jak, Pokemon. So very much put me in that camp of, my God, was I waiting a long time for this game. So, like many others, we will finally have a GTA 6 reveal next month. Everyone thinks it's the Game Awards, but Rockstar can really do this on their own terms just fine. So either way, they're saying early next month, so strap yourselves in. We're finally getting it. Now, this next story is kind of the same thing, where I feel like I would be remiss to not at least mention it, because it's not really PlayStation news, but Sony Pictures is going to be helping Nintendo make a live-action Legend of Zelda adaptation, which that alone was like kind of like a wild headline to see, but it's true. So Nintendo will be funding more than 50% of the project, but Sony Pictures is going to do the rest. The director is Wes Ball. Previously, he did the Maze Runner trilogy and is also doing Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. And the Uncharted and Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse producer Avi Arad will be working alongside Shigeru Miyamoto for this upcoming film, which, I mean, it's like, I don't know, what can you even say? It's another headline that was like, didn't see that coming, right? I'm of the mind where it's like, okay, Sony Pictures, with their sort of leverage and industry experience, they're probably going to be a big part of sourcing the talent for the film, which means immediately, Tom Holland, it's kind of their go-to, reliable for pretty much anything they want to do. So maybe we're going to get Tom Holland as Link. I don't know. I would prefer Danny DeVito, but that's just me. Maybe he could be Tingle or a Korok seed. I don't really know. But yeah, that also happened this week. Now, with all that said, it is time for Let's Talk Plus, the weekly Let's Talk PlayStation giveaway, where one of you can win a $10 PSN code. I would like to congratulate this viewer right here. I'll be contacting you very soon via email or X, and if you'd like to win a $10 PSN code, it's so simple. Follow the link down below, enter the Gleam giveaway, and supporting this channel a number of ways can gain you an entry, and I'll announce the winner next week, because I'm trying to help pay for your games. Those are all the stories from this past week that I wanted to talk about with you all, and our Tuesday video was looking at various special PlayStation 3 demo discs, and some of those compilation discs that would come bundled with a bunch of consoles. We looked at a lot of them, and I also launched a second channel that archived all the trailers from those demo discs. So finally entering my second channel arc here, which it's not really a proper second channel, but it's got a bunch of high quality trailer uploads, which no watermark on any of them. So if you are also a creator and you need B-roll for your content, then that's a great resource, because there's a lot of old school trailers on there from the PlayStation 3 and PSP generation that you should go take a look at and pull those if you need them. But that is pretty much it. So we are getting into the review season here with the new consoles, the PlayStation Portal, obviously, the Explorer earbuds. So we'll be doing a lot of that stuff in the coming weeks. But until then, that is it. So that concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan Benecki. Thank you all so much for talking with me, and I will see you all next Friday.